Hi, it's me, Kaity.
And me, Adriane.
And you're listening to KindlED,
a podcast where we dig into the science behind building relationships and environments that help kids unlock their full potential and become empowered learners.
Together, we'll discover evidence-based tools and methods that will empower you to kindle the curiosity, motivation, and well-being of the young people in your life.
I'm coming to save the day, you little owl.
Help me.
Oh, hey. Okay, welcome to Kindle. Can you guess what we're talking about today?
We're talking about play. Okay, very cool.
Yay.
Hi, Adriane.
Hello, Kaity. How are you?
After that owl attack.
Pretty awesome. So for those of you listening instead of watching, you need to go onto YouTube and watch the video because Kaity and I were just dressed up. And we're starting this episode in a play so that we can just, embrace our inner child.
Okay, so Adriane, you were telling me an interesting story a minute ago, but I thought it would be good if you told everyone the story.
Yeah, so this is when I really realized how important play was and the difference of play versus reality. So I don't remember how many years ago this was. I will link my blog post in the show notes because I wrote it right when it happened because it was a little traumatic. and then I dove into the research about play. I was at a park with a bunch of kids and a bunch of moms, and all the moms were over at the Ramada, and we all believe in, free range play and allowing kids to play without interrupting them, without correcting their play. So that was what was happening. And I think the moms just were enjoying hanging out with each other, let's be real, over under the Ramada. And I want to say there were at least 10 boys. I don't know if we even had any girls, but there were a few girls playing at the playground. And someone in the group, they brought toy guns, and they were bright and colorful guns. They didn't even shoot anything. It wasn't like they were Nerf guns, but they had like a ball on top that made lots of colors and they made noises, and the kids are all running around. They created this entire scene. I don't know if they were playing like cops and robbers or what they were playing, but they were like using some big shooting type of language but completely engrossed in their play, jumping off the playground, just being really wild and crazy and just getting all the energy out because this was right after school. So I walked over because at the time I think my middle son was about 4 or 5. And I wanted to make sure he was okay. So I walked over just to check to see what things were going. And I found myself in between this big playground structure and this climbing gym thing. I'm standing right in the middle, and there was a woman on one side of me and an older couple on the other side of me. I don't even know what happened, but all of a sudden they just started yelling, and they're yelling at the kids about shooting the guns and telling them, do not ever aim your gun at me. And it just turned into this really, honestly, this violent communication. I don't even know where it came from. And I'm standing there and we've been talking about nervous system a lot, and I go into flight typically, but I couldn't flee. So now looking back, I totally went into freeze and didn't even know what to do. So I just didn't even really talk. And this woman is just yelling at me and telling me these horrible things and saying that if, she's a principal of a school. And I did think back and I'm like, is this how you handle conflict in your school? But she said that she was a principal in school, and if she saw this behavior, she would be getting that family help. And she looked at me and told me I was a horrible parent. Why aren't you doing anything? And just screaming at me. And these kids are in frozen states as well, and they have their guns, and they don't know what to do. And one of the little boys, not mine, but one of the little boys, I think he went into goofy state, and he just started kind of like talking back to this woman. So that made her even more irate. And I think because I wasn't fighting back, they just kept getting louder and angrier because I wasn't matching, where they were and their sympathetic nervous systems. And eventually she pulls out her phone and she calls the police.
Oh my gosh, what?
Yes. And, but the police never came because she called and said these kids are at the playground playing with toy guns. I understand. I totally get it. I'm sure something probably happened in her life, or even just looking at the news. I get it. It's scary, right? But then it made me question, is this okay? Is it okay that these kids are running around pretending to be bad guys and good guys and, they're pretending to shoot each other? Because look at what's happening in the world. Like, should I have stopped that play? Like, am I a bad parent? And the research was extremely clear that this is the best possible way for kids to make sense of what's happening in the world is through this kind of play. I only found one study that was not in support of playing with toy guns, but it was in like 1992. And they said the kids that they did the study on came from very corporal punishment type of backgrounds and were hit and spanked and things like that. And so they couldn't tease that out to see if it was actually the toy gun play or if it was the way they were being treated at home.
Wow, that is a crazy story. And what I love is that you didn't actually get defensive about your position and you actually went and got the research to make a really good parenting decision. That's really interesting and cool. So tell us more about what we're going to talk about today. Give us the rundown on play. What are we going to tackle today?
Yeah, so we're going to tackle why play is so important. And honestly, what I've been reading is we're almost having an epidemic of play being taken away from kids and adults because adults should be playing too. And that's why we started with masks on our face and just to get, tap into that energy because that's the way we're created. And so Fred Donaldson, he's a play specialist, and he said children learn as they play. Most importantly, in play, children learn how to learn, which is everything that we're doing here on KindlED and this movement that we are a part of in helping really empower kids and help them learn how to learn. And play, I'm telling you, is the key. It's the foundation of learning, creativity, self-expression, and constructive problem solving. It's how children wrestle with life to make it meaningful. I loved that quote by Linn. She's a contemporary American psychiatrist, but it's how children wrestle with life to make it meaningful. How powerful of a quote and a definition of play is that? So I would love for you to describe your relationship with play.
Oh man, it's not good, Adriane. I'm not going to lie.
Really?
No, I actually hate play. I think that if you look at my work with treasure hunt reading or anything else, you'd be like, oh man, what a playful person. But I am faking it hardcore when I'm in that mode. It's so unnatural for me. And having 4 tiny kids who constantly want to play with me is like a nightmare for me. I am just this I'm a little bit of a workaholic. I'm just hyper focused on productivity. And if I cannot see how an activity is not tied to an end that I'm seeking, my brain is just not happy at all. I remember when I think I had maybe a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 1-year-old, and the boys wanted me to play cars with them. And I'm just forcing myself to move the car back and forward and make a sound. And it's just my 4-year-old's looking at me. He's like, no, you're supposed to play. He's trying to coach me up. I wasn't doing it right. So yeah, I've actually come a long way in that. And here's I think we'll talk more about this today, but I read a book called Playful Parenting by Lawrence Cohen, which we'll kind of dig into some of his stuff today, but it totally changed my perspective on play because it changed play into something that was not productive and proved to my mind that it is actually a very productive way for children and for adults to spend their time. And it goes through the science of what is actually being accomplished when you're playing. And now when I'm this seems funny, but that book turned play into work for me. And I like work more than play because I was thinking about this.
That makes sense.
With my childhood, I did really competitive gymnastics from a very young age. And we worked out for 6 hours at a time. And it was like the army in there. We weren't allowed to sit down. We weren't allowed to talk to each other. It was just get in line, do your drills, move through. And so I, from a very young age, was kind of shown that it is only work and productivity that is valuable, and that's what makes you valuable. So I kind of live through this lens of like, if I'm not valuable, if I'm not adding value, if I'm not doing something productive, then that's like an affront to my value and worth as a person.
Do you think in gymnastics, though, you ever reach this state of flow? Because that is play, right? Even though and when you were talking about that, I was thinking, well, what if I told you that play can lead to more productivity? There's a lot of research that backs that too, and creativity.
Yeah, knowing all of that stuff now makes me much more playful. It's like allowed me to find playfulness again, but I am not a person it's not natural for me. I don't enjoy it. And I've had to like do a lot of work to get there.
It can actually be really viscerally painful for some people. We are going to address that and explain why. But hopefully, as we dig into why it's so important and how it doesn't have to feel strenuous and feel hard, and play is in so many different facets of life. It doesn't have to be sitting with cars and getting into imagination. Or I had a friend that was like, I don't know how many times I can make the horse go around the corral. So I always use that story. And I was like, but do you read to your child? Do you make funny noises ever? That's still play. It's like, oh, I do play. I don't even realize that I do. And the reason why is because we're created to play. I mean, look at animals. Well, I know you're not a pet.
I wasn't an owl.
But oh, you were an owl, yes. So let's talk about what play is. So it is a complex set of behaviors characterized by fun and spontaneity. It can be sensory, so using like all the 5 senses, or actually probably all the 7 senses. Neuromuscular, so using your muscles, and cognitive, using the mind, or really any combination of the 3. And then play involves repetition of experience, exploration, experimentation, and imitation.
Cool. Have you read, what's that book? Free to Learn, Peter Gray?
Yes.
So he talks a ton about play. And I think some of the things he kind of defines play, like in order for something to qualify as play, it kind of has to meet some criteria. He says that play is an activity that's freely chosen by the players. So you can't like force someone to play. Unless you're a 4-year-old forcing me to play cards with you. That's why it doesn't feel like play, maybe, because it was like forced.
It was being forced. It wasn't, something that you wanted to do.
I was not freely choosing that. There you go. It's intrinsically motivated, or it's like you're participating for its own sake, for the enjoyment of it. There's no reward outside of the activity itself. There's structured rules within the player's mind. So it's not just like free for all. There's actually some strategy to it. When you're in a state of play, you're active, alert, but not stressed. So there's this kind of like playful frame of mind that exists. And I thought this was interesting from Lawrence Cohen's book, Playful Parenting. He asked kids what play is. And one of them said, it's what you do with your friends. And I think that that's just like so simple. And you can like to an adult, play is leisure, right? It's like you want to go out to lunch, you want to chat with your friends, you want to go to the park, like that's play for us. So play changes, but it still meets all of these same criteria.
A famous quote about play, and I don't know who said it, but play is a child's work. Okay, so let's dive a little more deeper into the science of play. See, I love play, and play is honestly how I think I survived childhood. I had a huge imagination, and looking at my kids and seeing their imagination, even my 11-year-old still, you get stuffed animals out or cars or they're running around. We were just at a First Communion this weekend and just watching these kids. They had no toys, no anything to play with except for their bodies. And they just created this world in this reception hall. And I can see myself in them. And I just loved the play. Play was my thing, and it still is as an adult. And so I would love to be a play researcher. But it's the gateway. The science of play tells us that play is a gateway to the social engagement system, which is what we talked about in episode 6, is that ventral state, that place in our nervous system where we can really connect with others and it just feels good. And this is where we can really access joy, and play allows us to de-stress and return to this internal safety. So it's a really good place, or a really good way to build up this vagal tone that we've been talking about. And it helps kids develop their prefrontal cortex, which is the thinker part of the brain. So think about this. So play can really, there's so many benefits of it. It can help with conscious decision-making, understanding of long-term consequences, compromise. It helps kids collaborate, and they're able to do it without this, like, there's freedom in it.
Yeah, I think that allowing kids the space to interact in these ways kind of de-risks experimentation. If you look at the way we educate kids and raise kids, there's a lot of fake work going on. It's like their work in school, they have to like memorize their time. It's all of the work that we give them is in preparation for their future so that they have the skills. But a lot of these things you can't teach. And if you interview employers, they're like, oh yeah, the people we're getting out of schools right now, out of higher education, like they have good book knowledge, but they don't have these skills. They can't collaborate, they can't present, they can't talk, they can't think critically. And all of these things it's really hard to actually develop them by receiving a lesson about them. Like, could we just go play collaboratively for 3 hours, or would we do better to like have a teacher read us a paragraph about how important collaboration is? Like, knowing that doesn't lead to being able to do that. So play is really where the rubber hits the road and we start applying all of these things. And it's not as scary as applying them in the real world because you're a child, right? Like people kind of disparage like the bubble of child, but you want there to be a bubble for the child because that's where they do their development, where they develop skills before they can apply them in the real world. And they do that through play. So in contrast to how I used to think about play is actually a super important, vital cognitive developmental tool that is natural, and actually all mammals play. It's so interesting. This is just like a thing that the brain craves. And so
it helps regulation. It's really important. It helps us get back to homeostasis.
So creativity, when you're playing, it engages that creative part of you. Working memory, which is like the part of your memory that holds on to the things like in the present. It's not your long-term memory, but it's like the things you need in the moment. It increases that, which leads to better learning. And if you can't hold something in your working memory, it can't go into your long-term memory. So it's part of the stages of learning and remembering. It improves gross and fine motor skills and helps kids conquer their fears, right? The world is a scary place when you're little, and kids, you think about how little control kids have over their lives. They're putting a lot of trust in the adults in their lives. They feel out of control a lot of the times. And so this gives them a little world that they can control. And that is really helpful.
Because it's not reality. I mean, it's their reality, but it's not actually happening. Mm-hmm. Like if a child is afraid of a monster at night that's going to be under their bed, but then if we can turn that into play to help them make sense of that fear, then that actual fear, because there's not a real monster under the bed, can go away, and they can develop this resiliency in their brain. It's really cool how it's connected. I think about we used to have Monster spray. I mean, it was a pretend can. We didn't even have a real can, right? We would spray it all over the room. And I'm telling you, I really, anytime I start to get dysregulated, I become a monkey, or I become like my kids, and they're so used to it at this point that I've noticed that I'll do it around other kids and they look at me like I am crazy. Yes. Wait, you're an adult. You should not be acting like that. But honestly, like it just helps me really tap into joy, and it helps me conquer these some fears that I have as well. So what else does it help with?
I love that idea of monster spray because that's tapping into the narrative part of controlling our nervous system, right? So we're in our sympathetic nervous systems. We're scared. We're nervous about something. I had a college professor once point out that even though the monster in the story is fake, the kid actually does wet the bed. He said, fake monster, real pee, which means that there's a big tie between the stories that we allow our brains, our narrative, and actually what happens physically in our bodies. And so if we can use story to control that narrative and play to like de-scarify make things less scary, then the child can tell themselves a different story, which actually does physically affect their body differently, which is super powerful. It's such a powerful tool.
Very powerful.
Yeah. So what else does play do? Leadership skills, conflict resolution, negotiation. Oh my gosh, watching my kids like figure out whose turn it is and like that's not fair and you broke the rules, like setting up like small governments around like certain games and things like that. It's just so complicated, the things that they're really experimenting with and pushing and pulling on each other.
Yeah, conflict management for sure. And it's so hard. I want to interrupt that part of play. The joyful, crazy play, I'm like totally fine with not interrupting, even if they're jumping off something that's 7 feet tall. For some reason, like I'm okay with that. But when they're negotiating or they're like getting intense, I so badly like want to jump in and interrupt it. But I'm reminded that they're developing these skills.
So a word about this real quick is when kids are negotiating, there is a certain degree of like, let them do it. But then that can escalate into we're really hurting each other's feelings now. We're saying things that are very hurtful, and that can escalate. And a lot of people take the approach of like, oh, you just always have to let them figure it out. But actually, they don't know how to figure it out. They need a model. They do need you to get in there and kind of scaffold their feelings for them, help them. Like, why are they so frustrated? They need to air that. They need to get that out and be able to look at it and hold it up and say like, oh yeah, I was really frustrated and this was my behavior. You know, they need to learn how to reflect so that they can learn to negotiate better. So I am not a proponent of let all the kids figure out all of the conflict.
Right. Me either. Yeah. We actually have a poster on our fridge that I created for my blog that is fighting rules, and they're pretty simple, but yeah, because they need those skills. But then whenever they're just negotiating though, and it's not getting to an escalating point, there's so much value in them figuring it out on their own without interruption is kind of what I meant. But yeah, being able, I think with anything, attuning to where they are. Yeah. There's a balance for sure.
And the way that I usually, if you want some like really like applicable take homes right now, like if I see that happening, I will come in and like make sure that I'm really calm. So I'm not like bringing in extra aggressive energy or anything. Like I'll like check myself like, all right, like I'm in vengeful right now. I can hang on to that and I can go kind of like interact. And so I'll just sit down and like maybe do, if they're my kids, like I'll just like do some, like I'll rub it back or I'll like make sure I'm like my face is very calm and my eyes are very bright and like that I'm being very connective in that moment. And then I'll just say like, it seems like I'll just kind of narrate what's going on. So I'll say like, wow, you were playing this game and you wanted this toy and now you want this toy. That's tricky. And I just like kind of say what's going on. And then I give the problem back to them. We're going to do some collaborative problem solving where we'll just be like, what should we do? Like, and the other important thing here is helping kids understand that like everyone has needs and wants. And we need to know the difference between a need and a want, right? Like I need to feel like my body's safe, right? And you want the toy. So everyone has a need. A need is more important. Like my physical safety is more important than your want to have the toy. So helping kids learn how to notice that and reflect on that has been really helpful for me. I don't know. That's just a tip. So coming in with a calm energy and saying, this is tricky. Here's what's going on. What should we do? Needs and wants conversation. That's kind of the script.
And Kaity, I heard some playful tone in even the way you were describing. So that's really good. And role playing, which we'll talk about later, is a really, really great way, which is still playing, even though it's going to lead to productivity. So maybe you'll like that a little more too. Okay. So it also helps with decision-making skills. And like we said from the beginning, playing equals learning.
100%. And not only is it good for kids, but it's essential and important for adults too. When we are in that playful state of mind, our brains are releasing hormones that are helping us improve brain function, jumpstarting our creativity. It also releases something called BDNF, which is like an essential factor. I mean, I couldn't like molecularly draw you a picture of it, but it's the magic chemical in your brain that makes it so you can grow new brain cells.
And I can imagine that it produces, oxytocin or different hormones that are really good for connection with the child as well, right?
Totally.
So play, simply put, it helps the brain. Play helps create, the neural connections and integrates the brain because we have a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere. And then we have the corpus callosum. How do you say it? Am I saying that correctly?
corpus callosum, but I've heard about
I used to say callosum.
Yeah.
The corpus, something with a C, but it runs down, it connects the two. And so we want to have integration because the different sides of the brain do have different functions. And so the more neural connections we can make across that, I mean, music does that. That's a source of play. So play basically is how kids make sense of the world. This big, scary world can not be so scary, as we mentioned, if they can just see it through play. They don't have the cognitive development like an adult does, and they don't have the understanding, but they can connect the dots through play. It also builds strong relationships because have you ever just started laughing around a bunch of kids? Or even just with the two of us? I mean, you start laughing, I start laughing too.
You just laugh sometimes and I'm like, I can't stop laughing. Like laughing is contagious and it's like so good for your brain.
Oh, here we go. So this is all about oxytocin, right? It's released in parents when they play with their kids, which is also a bonding hormone. And I can imagine this happens in a teacher student relationship as well, or any kind of adult that is in care of or in connection to a child. It really helps bond this relationship. And then play can help parents see the world through their children's eyes and understand their inner experience. We do this a lot with stuffed animals. If like my kids can't communicate their needs, we'll just listen to their play, and so many themes come out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's why he's been upset about that. It takes a lot of attunement and it takes a lot of just awareness, but it's really magical whenever you can kind of use play. We talk a lot about like being like a scientist and being curious. And so you can use play as kind of your like data collection to figure out what's happening.
So this is a good Lawrence Cohen quote. He says, play is where children show us the inner feelings and experiences that they can't or won't talk about. We need to hear what they say and they need to share it. Children don't say, I had a hard day at school today. Can we talk about it? They say, will you play with me? And so when we are so busy and so like, that's not productive. It's like, as if they came in and said, hey, like, I'm really struggling with something and I really need to talk to you. Like you would never say no to a child saying that. But when they express that same thing with, will you play with me? When they don't have that language, it's easier to like brush that aside.
Right. So Kaity, what keeps us from play? I mean, you talked about it, how for you, it just wasn't productive. Your brain just wasn't wired that way. And that comes from some of your childhood experiences. But what are other reasons that it's really hard, especially for adults, to tap into?
Yeah, for sure. So adults feel a lot of responsibility. So we get into this like productivity, like we're supposed to take care of the house. We're supposed to work. We're supposed to like, someone has to be the adult, right? And I actually so I come from a large family and I am probably the least playful of all of my siblings for some reason. And I remember my brothers, I have 4 older brothers, and they were always very playful, doing all kinds of crazy things. And my mom would literally let me babysit them when I was like 9. Because like they were like, we were like old enough to stay home by ourselves, but it's like I would like take notes on what they were doing. And like I would make lists of like all the chores I did while she was gone and all of the naughty things my brothers did. And she would be like, I like this, keep doing this. So yeah, she would like leave me in charge with all of my older brothers because I was just like so driven. But maybe that's wise. Like maybe I felt like I didn't feel safe in that environment because it wasn't like they were the responsible adult making sure everyone was safe. It was like, oh no, no one's at the helm right now. Right. Like I was kind of like coping with this insecurity of like anything could happen right now at the house. And so I had to step into that. Like I kind of almost had to sacrifice like my little kid. I had a great childhood. I don't want it to sound like that, but in some ways it was just like, oh yeah, I have to be the responsible party here because none of these other brothers are going to get it done. Sorry, brothers, if you're listening to this.
What I hear you say is, though, that I think this is connected to as well, is personality and temperament.
Totally.
Then also what can keep people from tapping into play, adults, is lack of emotional connection in childhood. So if they didn't have someone co-regulating with their nervous system, they did not have this internal state of safety. It may seem like their environment was safe, but that they didn't have internal safety. That's the, hierarchy of needs. That is the bottom layer. So it's really hard to get into those higher levels. And I'm guessing, play is up towards the top of the tier. It's really hard to tap into that. And then also developmental trauma. So developmental trauma is not necessarily like one specific traumatic event that happens, but it's really not getting your core biological needs met, which is connection, attunement, trust, autonomy, and love, which is really what we keep talking about here at KindlED, is all of these things of why they are so important, that kids get these just core biological needs met. And if that is able to happen, then they can be playful because they have internal safety.
Yeah, this reminds me of the Licky Rat Mom study. Have you heard of this? Where
I have. I think I heard it from you, though.
So I won't go into the whole study, but they've done a lot of studies with rats and nurturance, and they've just shown that rat pups that come from more nurturing mothers. Nurturing in a rat mom looks like nuzzling and like cuddling and licking their rat pups a lot. And so they'll track these pups that come from a lickier rat mom. And they show that they develop more curiosity, boldness. They have like healthier hearts. They're less anxious. They're less aggressive. They're more willing to like tolerate risk without becoming super anxious. Like all of the things we want for our kids are seen in these rat pups who are highly nurtured. And it's so opposite in society right now. You hear like, you got to cut the apron strings. You got to get them out the door. They got to like learn how to, but it's actually
ignore the behavior.
And then they've also shown in rodents that if you take a rat pup away from, let's start with the connection first. If you take a rat pup and put it with its rat mom right after it's born, allow them to stay together, the rat brain actually something turns off in the rat brain's body that makes it so their adrenal glands can't like put them into fight or flight, because they've interpreted this as the baby rat doesn't need that response because mama rat's going to handle anything. She's going to go mama rat on people, she's going to protect. So the baby does not need to be in that state of stress. And so that it remains deactivated for like weeks. And that tracks the brain for development. And if that doesn't happen, that thing kicks on and the baby's in flight or fight mode like almost all the time. And you see those more anxious, more aggression, less creative problem solving in a rat maze. As creative as they're not like painting, they're solving mazes and doing other rat things, but it kind of tracks them for survival instead of tracking them for development. And so when we play with our kids and when we create a world for them that feels safe and is highly nurturing, their brains actually like physically are different because of all of like the hormones and neurotransmitters that happen when we play and make our kids feel safe. So it's important, right?
So basically, if the thought of playing makes you feel anxious, or I heard Kaity say at the very beginning, I hate play. If you find yourself saying that, because what I also heard her say was, but I got curious to figure out why. So get curious. And, we're all wired to play. So there's usually some kind of blocker that's going on here. So start small and you can just sit and watch others play, or you can play a board game. For me, playing board games is way easier than just sitting with cars and trying to think of the voices and things like that. Or think of something that's, for me, I love to dance. We're dancing all the time, and that's play and that's connection with your kids. And how you can tell that you're connecting with your kids, just look at their faces. Just look at their eyes, and then you can paint in a crazy way, or start making funny faces. No. See? I got you to laugh.
Whenever my kids need someone to make funny faces, I'll just FaceTime you and you can make funny faces at them. Luckily, I have a husband that is very goofy. And when I was dating him, I thought, it's probably good for the kids to have someone who is not so serious all the time. I was like, all right, we'll marry this guy.
He balances it. I know. And, and sometimes there's fear around play, like I mentioned with the guns, that it makes sense to me why someone would be so upset about that. I mean, just look around. But, or you may live in a dangerous area, or you may, the culture around you does not look at play as being something as being safe. But just so you know, the brain interprets it as being safe. And what we're talking about here is internal safety. And we can just shift our mindset of looking at play as something that our kids have to do. They need it. It really helps them with their development. So how we can start is, first of all, is by attuning. We keep talking about that, right? Because there are times when play is not the answer. So you really want to read the room. There may be times when your kids are so dysregulated and they are in their sympathetic nervous system. If you come in and start trying to play, they may just even escalate even more, right? When we were talking about the negotiation skills, and you just kind of have to attune and kind of figure out what's going on. Or, if your child's chucking toys across the room and they're in this fit of rage, that's typically not the time to play, but you do want to connect right brain to right brain. So you do want to have, like Kaity said, just calm presence and start to connect them. And then maybe you can insert play once they start going up their ladder and start going up towards their social engagement system. And try not to use play as a distraction, because we want, especially distraction from big emotions or feelings, we want our kids to be able to fully feel their emotions. Something that I have done though, and I would attune to my child when he was 3, 4, he would just get so upset and go 0 to 60, just, in 5 seconds flat, and get really angry. And so I would stop and pause and if he would stop and pause, I'm like, okay, I got him. I can insert play here. And I would ask him where do you want me to take this anger? So Kaity, start screaming and yelling and being mad.
I'm crazy right now. I'm throwing everything.
Okay, Kaity, hey, can I take that anger? Where do you want me to put your anger, Kaity?
Throw it to the moon.
Ready, set. My favorite one was the one time he told me to eat it. So I took his anger and I put it in my mouth, and I was and he just started laughing. And then laughter and humor is a really good way to help kids move up their ladder into social engagement.
Another thing you can do here is maybe if a kid is a little older and being goofy doesn't really feel like they're not, I mean, you can be goofy with older kids, not to say that, but you can also help them channel that anger or any negative emotion into the ground. I can just imagine okay, you're going to take all of this energy, you can imagine it as a light or a heat or whatever. You're going to give it a physical property so that you can better imagine your way into getting rid of it. And I just push it into the ground, or we pretend that trees are we play a lot of foresty nature games outside. And so the trees are our friends. And so if you have a sad feeling or something, you can go touch a tree, and the sadness, the tree will take the sadness and put it into the earth and grow something good from it. And it will just turn it. I don't know. It just is.
That's still play. Yeah. So you play.
But it's getting it out, turning it into something, and validating it too, because it's not hey, you just need to stop having that feeling. It's stop having the feeling is not possible, right? And for us, it's your feeling's making me so uncomfortable, or it's inconvenient to me. I need you to just stop because it's making my nervous system uncomfortable. But to realize that's just not really an option. And so we just need to accept where we're at and do something with it. And then, play is an awesome way to do that. So have you ever heard of the love languages? The book?
Yes, I have.
So there's actually play languages, which is really interesting because you can kind of learn to know what your kids' play languages are, your students. So the first one that I think is really interesting is action, initiation, leadership. They want to play with this idea of being in charge. And I think that that's what they're telling you when you have a child who's really wanting to be the leader, is that they maybe don't feel like they have a lot of control in their life, right? You can kind of look at what they're wanting to play and be okay, if that's the need, then there must be a lack that's the opposite. So that's how you can kind of interpret what your kids are telling you by what they're wanting to play. And so if you give them opportunities, and this kind of shows up in unhealthy ways by being super bossy or trying to make things happen, that it can show up in a non pro-social way. And what they're telling you is, I need practice in this area. And if you give them an opportunity to do it in play, that still helps them develop those skills, but it doesn't come out as them like being bossy or controlling or whatever. So a game that I love to play is Bedtime Captain. This works for little kids. You can play any sort of You're the Captain game where it's their job suddenly to get everyone brushed and in their pajamas and everyone to do the bedtime routine. You just put them in charge of something and you give them a funny hat and everyone has to call them captain for 10 minutes and it's hilarious.
I love it.
And another one that I love, so the next play language is touch and like coziness. That can be a language. And we play a game where this is from Lawrence Cohen's book. And I took this from his book and we play it all the time. And it's been a really great outlet for my girls, especially. So we play the pillow game where my 3-year-old will just come say, "Hey mom, can we play the game where I'm a pillow?" And so I just put her on the ground and I'm so tired. And I pretend that I'm going to go sleep. And then she moves her tummy around or makes some noises. And I'm like, what? This pillow's so wiggly. And then so many times she'll just sit there and look at me and she'll just stop and she'll say, "Mom, I love this game." And I'm just like, oh, this is
which is saying, "Mom, I love you."
This is feeding me in a way that I need to be fed, which is so great. And then someone will be they will run. They'll be like, "Are we playing the pillow game?" Everyone will come if someone gets to play the pillow game. Learning and teaching is another play language. So you'll see kids playing things like school. Being the center of attention is another one. So it's theater, singing, dancing, acting. Art and creativity is another one. Caretaking and service is another one. And the other day I had a doctor's appointment, just a normal, I'm fine, no one worry. Just a normal doctor's appointment. And Maggie, my 3-year-old, found out that I was going and she started immediately putting her shoes on. And she was not going to come to my doctor's appointment, but she was like, "Oh, I will come and I'll make sure you're okay at the doctor's office." And I was like, oh, because when you're at the doctor and you're nervous, I make sure that you're okay. And so obviously you would play that you were going to take care of me. And I just think that is a really fun little gem to find in a kid who's just really service oriented and very caretaking. We want to nurture that and give them lots of opportunities to play that.
As you're going through these, I was just thinking about all of my play languages as a child. And I'm like, yep. And with learning and teaching, what's really interesting, especially the work that I'm doing now, is I totally had a little micro school in my neighborhood. It was called Play Palace. I love, because I could be bossy. I could be a leader. I could teach. And I was learning. We would do plays and we did Annie in my basement. And we made all the neighbors. We made them. We didn't ask them. Pay 50 cents to come and we popped popcorn. But I was always the teacher, always the caretaker. And that was really my role in real life too, because I had younger brother and sister that were 9 and 7 years younger than me. Our parents worked all day long. So I was already playing that role in real life, but then it's amazing how I adapted that into my play. Probably just to make sense of that world, right? I'm just realizing this as the words are coming out of my mouth. So other play languages, we have stillness, ease, and simplicity. So these are for kids that don't like to make decisions and they just want things to be easy. And intrigue, exploration, love being scared, mystery, healthy connection to fear. I would have my brother and sister sit out front of our house and we would put a blanket. And I remember sitting there and telling them, "Okay, we're going to watch a really scary movie." There was no movie screen. There was no actual movie. And we would act like we're so scared right in front of our house. I bet it was pretty cute to see all these kids just screaming and things like that. Or there was a city bus that would come down our street every single day. And I really liked to make my little brother scared. I thought that was really fun. My parents did not think that was as fun whenever they found out. I told them that every time the bus came down, I was like, "Clap your hands 5 times, put your hands up, and you have to drop to the ground." And then one time we were leaving and a bus comes and I saw Grayson getting ready to do it. And I was like, no, don't do it. Because I knew I'd probably get in trouble. But yeah, that's the way I was playing. And then we have exploration, big movement, and excitement. As you can see, that's how I play. Order, structure, dependability, which is like having a plan or organizing.
Can I tell a story about this one?
Absolutely.
So it's my 3-year-old's birthday this week. She's turning 4. And I did not want to plan her birthday party. And so I called our micro school guide and I hired our 9-year-old, 10-year-old micro school class to plan a birthday party. And it is like all they talk about. And it's like it's just like taking over their school.
The whole class? Like not the guide, but the
whole
class?
Yeah.
That's
I was
so
like, you
cool.
have $200 and like, here's the date of the party. And like, I just want to show up to a party. And like, they're doing all the food, all the decorations. They're going to come and like do face painting and stuff, all of this cool stuff. And they have just like had the best time, but it's tapping into this planning and organizing that is a real adult skill. It's like, not only is that like good for their entrepreneurial development and skill development, but to them, it's not like, oh, great, this is a good practice for when I really have a business someday. It's like, oh, what a fun game. Right. And like, they're just in it so hard right now doing all of this planning stuff. So it's great.
That's so cool. And another play language is quirky silliness. So like I said, I will act like a monkey. I mean, during COVID, when we were in our houses during quarantine, I was a lot of animals to be able to cope. Or like if I can't get my kids in the bathtub, I'll just slither like a snake all the way down the hallway. Thankfully, we have all hard floors. I'm telling you, I'm like really tapping to play.
So with this one, sometimes it's hard to get kids out of their shell a little bit to like actually be silly. And so you can scaffold this a little bit. We used to play animal charades where I would whisper an animal in their ear and then we have this big hill that we live by. And so they would have to roll down the hill in the style of this animal and get everyone to guess what they were. And so it's like,
that's awesome.
It's like charades almost, but it's just like bigger and sillier and there's more movement. So that's a fun idea you could try.
And you're using a hill, which is brilliant. I love that. As we talked about before, play involves so many different parts of the body as well. And then the last play language is fantasy and daydreaming. So especially like what I think about is kids that love reading fantasy or escaping in these other worlds, or they just become these characters, kind of like, we came on and like, I'm someone else. I don't have to be Adriane for the day.
Okay. So I love this one because it reminds me of toys. And there's probably tons of toys in your house or in your classroom, whatever. Some toys lead to more of this like fantasy, creative, like fake world play, and others don't. And I read an article like years and years ago when I just had like one little baby about toys. And I kind of pulled from that article some rules about toys that I'll have in my house. And it's been so interesting to watch as my kids grow up and get older and watch their play when they play with like all of the neighborhood kids. Like my kids are the kids who are leading all the games. So if you watch my kids play with all of the other neighborhood kids, you'll see that they are kind of the ones pushing these fantasy, like let's just pretend games, and other kids will play like more familiar scripty type games, or they'll want to like play a sport where there are rules and they're less comfortable in this creative space. So I want to share some of my toy rules.
I love it. Yeah.
So you want to think about toys as like material for play. Instead of like, you want a child to approach something and instead of saying, what does this do? You want them to have to ask, what am I going to do with this? How am I going to get the fun out of this? And sometimes we get toys that are like have lights and sounds and buttons, and it's like a show, right? It's like, what does this do? That's the question. It's like, what if I push this button? What sound happens? And that's great for like cause and effect and things like that. But for stimulating creative play and imagination, you actually want the play to be super hard. So 2 rules that I have is that we don't buy anything with characters in it. And I know like if you love Disney or like whatever, like that's going to be a hard one. These are just ideas. But we don't buy any character-based toys because once you buy a character, that thing is that is that character. If you buy a Buzz Lightyear, it's really hard to pretend that it's a cowboy or something else because it looks like Buzz Lightyear. But if you just buy kind of a plainer looking doll, one day it can be a chef, one day it can be a ninja, one day it can be a ranger. Like there's an unending stream of things it could be because you didn't already heavily script that. You can also think about giving your kids like materials, like raw materials to play with. So I'll give my kids things like tons of acorns, or like we'll have like an acorn collection, right? So it's just like this acorn is now a family, and the next day it's a family of puppies, and like it's just like raw materials. For costumes, like maybe just the fabric of something, or maybe just a very plain hat that can be multiple different things and doesn't overly script their play. So no characters. We also don't do any batteries. That's just a good, like if something with batteries comes into your house, that's just a thing that you're going to want to think about, because probably it's going to fall into this, what does it do? Not what am I going to do with it? And so it's just like a moment of discernment for us. But I recognize I'm a crazy person, so you might not be connecting with any of these ideas. But this handful of tips has really helped keep our house grounded in imaginative play, and has really built some cool skills in my kids that are paying off now later down the line.
I can completely concur. We have the same, wood blocks, and we have in our kitchen, because we do homeschool, we have this big locker, and it's just filled with materials that they can create. And this weekend, my son, my 6-year-old, we have a tape. We go through lots of tape. He has duct tape and paper towel rolls. And I was like, what are you making? He made a whole mini golf set just because he wanted to. And just the imagination, I do notice too, when they're out playing, they're always leading these games. And the one, when you said like, it doesn't have to be like a character. One time we were camping and I hear him playing like, yeah, I'm going to go, you go this way. Okay, let's climb up the mountain. And I wasn't looking at him. I think he was about 4 at the time. I'm going to go up the mountain. Oh no, another one bites the dust. And I look over, you know what he was playing with?
What?
He was playing with socks, just 2 dirty socks. And I was just like, this is incredible, because it really does cultivate just this creative way of playing and really allowing their brains to feel safe and free to make whatever decisions and choices that they want. So as you can see, play is really important. Play does not have to be something you hate. And personally, for me, it is my best tool in creating a strong relationship and connection with my kids. And I found when I go to micro schools, being playful is the perfect way to develop trust right off the bat as well. And, it's fun, and it's the glue truly that can connect us to our children and connects us to our students, so we can truly feel like they are a reward and find the joy in those small moments. When parents ask me, oh, my child's misbehaving, or this is happening, like, what should I do? I always resort to play. I'm like, get playful. And they look at me like, what? You get playful? Yeah, but they're being disrespectful. Yes. Tap into play. I guarantee that it takes the ship in one way, and it helps just, change it. Child's not getting in the bath, child's not doing homework or whatever, it's like, use play because that is their true language.
Totally. I was just this morning, there were a bunch of grapes on the floor and I almost stepped on one, which is a big pet peeve of mine, because I think grapes are yucky when they're like squishy. Sorry. Can't think about that too much.
Yeah,
so I was like, there's grapes on the floor over here. I wonder whose grapes these are. And the girls were in there and they were just like, I don't know. Like, clearly they put the grapes on the floor. But they were like just denying it. And I was like, oh no, these baby grapes are sad. They need their family. And I could have gone into like 1, 2, 3 magic mode, where I'm like, someone needs to pick these grapes up. 1, 2. And instead I just shifted to like, oh no, we need to help. And like brought in their caretaking, like, those like
tapped into their play language.
So I brought in their play language, and immediately they're like, oh no, mom, help. And like, they like brought this, like the grape things down and like picked it up, and like, that could have gone differently, but it didn't because of play. Thanks, play. All right. Well, that wraps up our conversation on play, and we're going to head into our question of the day.
This comes from Elizabeth. I have read about how play is important, but I do not have time to sit down and play. I'm busy with work and house chores, and I'm rarely in a playful mood. Can't my kids just play with each other and with our toys?
Great question. I'm like so excited for Elizabeth to listen to this episode because hopefully there's like some good answers in here. But there are a few other tips that I thought of for this because sometimes you really can't, right? And our time is limited. And so I feel like we haven't really addressed that. And so what you can do is give it to them in a wish, which means like express to them, like if they're like, Mom, can you play with me? And you really can't, instead of just no, I'm busy, you can say, what if we could play for 1,000 hours straight and we didn't have to sleep and we could just play all day? And they will be really excited by that, even though that's not possible, right? It's like kind of round, it like softens the no, I can't play, but it also makes it clear that you want to play. The other thing you can do here is just make sure they know you're disappointed that you can't. And just like a little empathy check here. Imagine you're dating someone and they had to break a date with you. Would you want them to say, sorry, can't, like, see you later? Or would you want them to say, hey, I'm so sorry. I really wish that I could be there. I'm going to be thinking about you the whole time. Like, you can soften that I can't play right now with I wish I could play. Like sometimes when I go on a business trip or something, I'll call them and I'll just like really be very dramatic and be like, I'm so sad you guys are playing without me and I'm here and this is so like, just like really go into a fit about it. So I'm playing with them, but it's playing about how I can't play and how I'm sad, so that they know that if you had the choice, you would want to be with them, that they're your number one, even if you can't actually do that with your time. And then the last thing I'll say about this is that when you are strapped for time, it's just important that you use all of the moments and minutes that you do have to like play can like turn up the connection effectiveness of those minutes. You can get a lot more connection and relationship out of those minutes if you approach them with playfulness. So like embedding it. We're making dinner, we're cleaning up, we're going to bed, and we're using silly voices and we're acting things out and just embedding play into your life. It's like a double whammy. It's like a 2-for-1. You get the things done, you spend time, you turn up the connection. Yeah, but those would be my tips for Elizabeth. What do you think, Adriane?
My number one tip is always to incorporate it into what you're already doing. So you can even, if this is helpful for you, to sit down and write down what your routines are, write down what you're already doing. And whenever you're in connection with your kids, so like for us, dinner time, bath time, I'm already helping during those times. So then I just incorporate play. So this past week, I don't know if it's because I was preparing for this talk, I feel like I've been extra playful. And my son, like bath time, he gets washed in 2 seconds, right? It's really, really fast. So he gets out and we're just putting the towel on our faces and just being, and then taking it off and having a new look on your face. And it was just so cool to watch. Like he was coming up with his own ideas, but then he was mimicking all the things I was doing. Like he would turn around and I would turn around. I would put my foot up on my head and just be goofy. It took maybe 3 minutes, 3 or 4 minutes of play. And you could tell, felt so connected, and then went right into bed instead of fighting me on bed because he just got that connection he wanted. Or my 13-year-old, because it's easier with the little ones, right? But with my 13-year-old, even I will just do funny voices with him or start talking really and just weird, what? Oh my goodness. And then I could tell, like, he's like, keep talking like that. And I was like, haha, yes. I love it. I'm like, what are we doing today? I'll just do like really, really silly voices. And it's go get your shoes. We're going to go get in the car. I would have already said that in my normal voice. So by having playful voices, and then honestly for me, because I have this really healthy attachment to play, and it's just something that really fulfills my heart and my soul, it makes me feel good too. And then and then this wasn't overnight. Like this has taken time as a parent to go, like I'm so busy. I have all these things I have to do, and incorporate play into that. And honestly, I even play when my kids are little.
I love that. You're like my play role model. I'll get there. Awesome. Well, thanks for that question, Elizabeth. We hope that was helpful. And now I'm excited to announce this week's Spark Squad nominee. This week's nomination goes to Kathy Normile. Kathy goes above and beyond to advocate for her students' needs. Many people cognitively understand how to come alongside students and see their behavior as information, but I've never worked with a teacher anywhere who actually takes this approach 100% of the time. Her foundation of trust with her students is truly astounding, and she manages to find that balance between autonomy, structure, and individualized learning. So congratulations, Kathy. And thank you for everything that you do with your students. We see you, we acknowledge you. Thank you, thank you. And I'm sure your kids would also express their gratitude to you. So that's it for today. We hope you've enjoyed this episode about play.
Yes. And don't forget to subscribe. No, kidding. Don't forget to subscribe to KindlED wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review. Rate us. It's really easy to do. Just rate now, as long as you're not driving. Just grab your app, open it up, rate us, review us, share your favorite episode on social media, in your stories, so it doesn't have to stay on your feed forever, and tag us at Prenda Learn. For more KindlED content, head on over to prenda.com/KindlED and subscribe to the KindlED newsletter.
And also don't forget to email us your questions, challenges, anything you want coaching on, and your Spark Squad nominations to podcast@prenda.com. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to keep kindling.